Men will stop at nothing.
I'd rather die than lose, I think.
You can't trust women.
Women can get away with everything, I think, in life, just by smiling.
Men and women can't get along.
I don't feel Craig understands me hardly at all.
Are we different species? 5 men, 5 women.
I found it really, really difficult.
Men have no empathy.
The world's biggest sex survey. Secret experiments. And in a world first, brain-changing drugs.
It's totally changed my life.
All right, mate. How you doing?
Prepare to discover what really separates the sexes. We've invited 5 women and 5 men to take part in a series of unique tests.
Good morning. Good morning. Could you tell me your name, please?
Yes, Jamie Hannah.
Our test group has been chosen to represent as broad a range of people as possible.
And what's your occupation?
I'm a housewife.
Investment banker.
Engineer.
Teaching assistant.
And how many sexual partners have you had?
3.
I can count on both hands. God, I can't answer that.
A number, less than my wife, I think.
The volunteers know they're taking part in a program about the differences between men and women.
We need to take a saliva sample.
What they don't know is that by the end of the program, some of them will have totally changed their view of who they really are. First, they need to complete the BBC's online sex survey. They'll be tested on everything from language to love, geometry to greed.
On your laptop computers, there are a series of programs that assess a whole range of traits and abilities. What we want to see is how the brains of men and women differ.
Professor Richard Lipper and his colleagues designed the survey for us, and since it went online, nearly 500,000 people worldwide have taken part.
This is the single largest gender survey that's ever been conducted. We've never been able to assess such a variety of people in so many different areas.
What we want to know is how different our men and women are, and how they measure up to the nation.
I'd rather die than lose, I think.
I'm more interested in engineering than having people.
I'm a fighter. I think that's a masculine quality that I definitely have.
I'm a man in a traditionally female role.
I like to say how I feel. If that gets me into trouble, so be it. But that's me.
He sees me a bit like a Rottweiler or something.
And I always wear something that's quite low cut and quite, you know.
In my job, we deal with hundreds of millions of pounds. They're just numbers on screen. They're just zeros.
I wouldn't really say I was a girly girl at all.
We'll be testing our volunteers whatever they do. Even the cab they arrived in was rigged with hidden cameras.
Hello, mate. All right, how you doing?
And driven by an actor.
BBC, eh? Oh, a lot of bollocks. Is it? What's going on?
They're doing a science programme, difference between men and women.
The way they think, the way we think differently, yeah?
Yeah. As in, men do, women don't, you know?
I love documentaries. There's so much rubbish on some.
The actor makes sure that all of our passengers hear the same conversation.
Well, they were saying that the square mile down here, if it was an independent country, it would be the 20th richest in the world. Yeah. That's what they were saying. You think after 29 years of marriage you know someone pretty well, wouldn't you?
You would do, wouldn't you?
Not really, you just run off and help bloke.
I'm single. I think that's why I'm on the show. I just fucking party my ass off around the world.
I just can't believe I was that stupid.
But will the men and women remember different bits of what they've heard?
Can the next person come in, please?
Psychiatrist Dr. Sandra Scott springs a surprise interrogation.
What kind of car did you come here in?
It was a silver Mercedes.
Anything else?
Silver leather seats, GPS system on the dashboard.
That it?
Well, I noticed the central locking switch had a chrome handle for opening the door of the central locking.
Did you talk to the cab driver?
Yeah, we talked about the sort of financial centre of London.
Yeah, they were going on about the square mile, which is, you might have heard of it, just down here. It's where all the banks are in London.
Yeah.
They reckon that if it was an independent country, it'd be the 20th richest in the world. Unbelievable.
Can you recall 3 facts, or possibly more, of what he told you about the City of London?
I can't remember. Who's no.
Do you remember him talking about his marriage?
Yes, I do, yeah.
So that was another topic covered?
It was, yeah. The car was automatic, by the way.
Sorry?
The car was automatic, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, it had a walnut trim.
So were you actually listening to him?
Yes, connecting, but rather than wishing to store information, so...
What did interest you?
Talking about his marriage problems, he was really quite open, which quite surprised me, really, because men are quite normally hide their feelings, but he was quite forthcoming.
You know, he's glad that the kids are older and they've moved out, but it just means that he's alone now, really.
And he said if it had been the other way round, she would have found out really early on, you know, sort of woman's instinct and all that.
How did you catch her out? You didn't find her come home early, did you? That'd be awful.
Generally speaking, all of the women had a much better memory for the emotional facts.
Men were more thing-oriented, and women were more people-oriented.
Women like relationships, men like facts. But according to Italian scientists, it's not quite so simple.
Okay guys, take a seat, make yourselves comfortable. We're just going to get you to watch a few minutes of TV.
If the Italians are right, you're about to witness something very revealing.
A high street bank has warned that the number of new buyers has plunged to its lowest level for 20 years. The problem of...
When we asked our viewers what they'd seen and heard, we discovered an extraordinary thing.
When 24-hour drinking becomes legal in England and Wales later this year, pubs...
The men remembered some of what our male newsreader had said.
Licences had been applied for, 6 from London, none from other places.
If they didn't curb it within 8 weeks, they were going to receive a fine.
Scientists are warning that a recent outbreak of bird...
But when they were watching his female colleague, they appeared to have gone deaf.
The SARS outbreak in 2002.
She did 2 stories. She was quite attractive for a start.
The girl had a pink top with black trim. That's about all I can remember.
And she had nice breasts.
We found that men are indeed interested in facts. But one thing they're more interested in is sex. Which stands to reason. Men are, after all, much more promiscuous than women. Aren't they?
How many partners have you had sexual intercourse with in the past 5 years?
How old were you when you lost your virginity?
We sent our researchers to find out just how much more promiscuous men really are. Our street survey found that on average, men reported 13 sexual partners, while women only managed 7, in line with other sex surveys. But hold on, who are all the men sleeping with?
And the survey is about sexual behaviours and attitudes.
The trouble with asking personal questions face to face is that you rarely get honest answers.
How many sexual partners have you had?
25 or something like that, 20, 25?
Yeah. I can count on both hands. So 10.
Either men are exaggerating, or women are being economical with the truth. To find out what's going on, we asked our volunteers to take a lie detector test.
I'm going to put one around your stomach, and I'm going to put one around your chest. Okay. And take a reading from one of them. I breathe normally without taking any deep breaths or holding your breath.
Okay.
Try not to nod or shake your head. Just say yes and no.
Okay.
I am the owner of a financial and accounting recruitment firm. I'm very money driven. Jack, I want to have nice holidays, you know, I want to get my convertible sports car, and in the next 6 months they're my goals, so I'm going to achieve them. I'm going to make sure it happens.
Alright, I'm about to start the test.
Okay.
What I want to hear from you is a yes or a no.
Okay.
Is your first name Lucy?
Yes.
Have you had around 10 sexual partners in your lifetime?
No.
Have you had more than 10 sexual partners in your lifetime?
Yes. I have had more sexual partners that I'm admitted to. You know the reasons as to probably why I didn't want to sort of announce it, but yes, I have.
Well, what are the reasons?
Well, I think the main reasons is sort of, you know, the reputation side of it. You know, I want to attract, and that's why I think the man out there is still old-fashioned in his views and points. I think that, you know, he still likes a very sort of feminine type of girl, and the thought of him, I've slept with a lot of men, you know, disgust him.
When they filled in our anonymous online survey, men and women did admit to having the same numbers of sexual partners. And what's more, nearly a quarter of both sexes admitted to having been unfaithful to a long-term partner. We also found that whatever their past experience, men predicted more than twice as many sexual partners in the future than women did. So even though men are distracted by the idea of sex, they aren't more promiscuous than women after all. It's just that they'd like to be. So, one myth busted. What about the other stereotypes?
Women are more emotional, more understanding, friendlier, sensitive, caring.
But are women really more caring? We hired an 8-year-old actress, fitted her with a secret camera, and abandoned her on a London street. This is what happened next. This test is a measure of empathy, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and to act appropriately.
Hello, darling.
You alright, sweetheart?
Yeah. You're waiting for someone, Pet?
Yeah, my mummy's just gone in Sainsbury's.
How long has she been?
Don't know.
Some company.
Well, I think it was shock to both of us to see a little girl sitting all on her own up against a cement wall.
Yes, and you just wanted to go in and protect her and make sure that she was okay.
But it was just common sense. When you see a little girl on her own, you don't walk past her.
I saw her twice actually, going down and coming back up. I thought she was probably waiting for somebody in the hairdresser's act.
I noticed she actually did have quite a brand new pair of shoes on, so I thought she doesn't look as if she's in a large amount of trouble.
Oh, well, now look me out, won't you? And if I'm seen talking to little girls like that, what's your reaction?
Of all the excuses given for doing nothing, concern about being seen as a paedophile seems the most plausible. But note that none of the men alerted the authorities or asked a woman to help on their behalf. During the hour we filmed, 41 women stopped to help.
Went in the shop.
Some of them were so concerned that they came back several times. But only 2 men stopped, and one of them was with a woman.
You alright, darling? Yeah.
22% of women offered help, as opposed to just 1% of men. But this is just one test, and one way of measuring empathy. Our volunteers are about to try another. Former para Paddy Doyle runs a boxing gym.
If it wasn't for fitness, I'd be in prison. You know, I would be.
Paddy holds 130 world records for fitness and endurance. He is officially the world's fittest athlete.
I've had to be selfish while doing my sport. And it's affected my relationships because women couldn't take that. It was either the world records or them. And unfortunately, I went for the world records.
Like the others, Paddy has filled in a detailed psychological questionnaire designed to measure empathy. Of the 500,000 people who took part in our online survey, over 90% of the top scorers were women. Men were very much in second place.
How do you think your husband would do on this? How do you think his
empathy
scores?
score, you're having a laugh right at bottom. Men have no empathy, no.
Okay, well let's talk to a man, see how he feels about that.
For empathising, I got 12 out of 20.
Oh, are we surprised?
Yes, I am.
Thought it would have been a bit less. Yeah, so that has surprised me.
In the empathy test, Paddy actually outscored all the other men, and all but 2 of the women.
Paddy's broken the mould and showed that some men can be very empathic. What about you?
Definitely not the case. Apparently, according to this test, I got 3 out of 20. Apparently, I've been told I do lack a bit of empathy, and I have tried using it in a sentence before, like saying, I empathise with you, but apparently that's not empathy.
Can I suggest you go to Paddy for some lessons?
I
will. Liz and Craig Watson have a personal interest in empathy.
Everyone looks so happy, don't they? It seemed very idyllic, really. I remember just feeling very comfortable with you then. Craig is very calculating. He's very stubborn, incredibly stubborn.
Liz is the opposite of myself. She's almost too fiery, too almost out of control at times.
I don't feel Craig understands me hardly at all. And we've gone out sometimes and Craig's had a book and he's reading the book when we're out. You know, that really upsets me.
To be fair, I probably haven't done that for several years.
You've done it recently. Craig is living the life of a bachelor, actually. And he's a great bachelor.
Liz and Craig blame each other for their failure to communicate. So in an unusual move, we've asked neurologist Ruben Gurr to examine their brains.
So here is the scanner, and what we will get is an image of your brain anatomy, but more importantly we'll get images of what parts of the brain become active when you have to solve specific kinds of problems.
A key part of empathy is recognizing how other people feel.
We'll start doing the tests, and the first test is the test of emotion recognition. And you'll have to answer whether the face looks to you like a positive or a negative emotion.
To me, communication is mostly about the non-verbal, not what you actually say, but what you're feeling. And I think Craig's not that in touch with his feelings enough.
Actually, maybe I've got perhaps more sensitivity in that area than I'm given credit for, and vice versa, that Lizzie hasn't got quite as much strength in that area as she gives herself credit for.
Well, that's interesting. I just learned something else.
If the scan reveals that Liz and Craig read other people's emotion differently, then some of their misunderstandings might be instantly explained.
The part of the brain that deals with emotions is right in the center of the brain, right here. Liz shows a hefty activation, whereas Craig's brain shows no activation at all in this emotional part of the brain. Whereas you went straight to the emotional part and you say, how would I have felt if I were looking like that? You immediately invoke that emotional part of your brain.
Liz is 40% more accurate than Craig at reading emotion in others because she is using the emotional part of her own brain. And the scans reveal that in this test, Craig shows no emotional response at all.
Liz, are you surprised at Craig's result?
What surprised me most was the fact that it was completely devoid of any emotional response in the centre part of the brain. I mean, that actually has given me a big insight into why I've often felt I wish he would show some emotion.
Yeah, but also switching back, in terms of our relationship, in terms of just our understanding, I sometimes need things to be spelled out. You know, actually don't think I'm just going to take it on telepathically or so. Just, you actually got to tell me. And also, I mean, in situations where there's potential conflict and so on, I'm trying to calm things down actually, 'cause I guess I just want to avoid the conflict, whereas you're more able to, or more willing to sort of embrace.
Well, I just think it's a much more interesting level to operate on if you can get into your emotional response a bit more.
If women assume that men are just like them, and vice versa, that's when you get into difficulties. As far as you're concerned, you're sending out all these signals. It's entirely obvious that you are upset. So then when the bloke doesn't respond, you up the ante some more because you're determined to get the emotional response. You introduce emotive topics, so he has to respond. He can't ignore it. And then what do? You end up hanging a ding-dong.
It's a shame for it to have to degenerate into a row just in order to activate the emotional response.
The only real way forward is to realise we are different, we process this sort of information differently, and how are we going to make that work?
Until recently, scientists were reluctant to acknowledge any sex differences, partly because of history. In 1879, Gustave Le Bon, a founding father of psychology, announced that intelligent women are so rare that they are as exceptional as the birth of any monstrosity, as, for example, of a gorilla with 2 heads. Consequently, we may neglect them entirely. And that, 125 years ago, was medical fact.
If I bring out a male brain and put it next to a female brain, you can see there's very little difference in any of the structures on the surface of the brain. The only difference really between these two is their size. And in general, female brains are a little bit smaller. So the explanation for this is men tend to be bigger. And so this is in proportion to that difference in body size. I don't think anyone's going to suggest that a small man is any less intelligent than a large man. Having said that, there have been a number of studies to suggest that certain areas of the brain might be slightly different in size. And the biggest areas of difference appear to be in language processing and also in this part of the frontal lobe, which is important in visuospatial processing. And this might be the basis for some of the functional differences we see between men and women. They may just be wired up differently.
In this test, Tim is listening to made-up words.
Bok.
Different sounds are played to each ear at the same time.
Bab.
But Tim only hears one of them.
Geb.
When Claire listens to the same test, this is what she hears.
Geb and Gad.
Because women use both sides of the brain to process speech, Claire can hear both sounds.
Todd and Top.
Dod.
But Tim, who as a man only uses the right side of his brain,
Ged,
can only hear one.
Bok. I found it really, really difficult. It almost came over as one word in both ears at the same time.
Things aren't looking very good for men.
That was automatic, by the way.
Object-centred, partially deaf, unempathic, sex-obsessed fantasists is not how most of them would like to be remembered. Men are supposed to be go-getting, thrusting, successful. So we're giving them a chance to shine. After all, men love competition, and they're great at driving. Aren't they?
I want women to win, badly. I'm going to really try and win this. I'm in.
I almost feel it in the pit of my stomach. I just want to be better than everybody else.
The hormone testosterone plays an important part in competitiveness. Testosterone, the so-called male hormone, is actually produced by both men and women. We're analysing our volunteers' hormone levels throughout the competition to see how their testosterone responds.
It seems that men, the kind of biological response to a competition is very different than that in women. In the men, we see large fluctuations, which is consistent with what one expects in response to competition, but we see virtually zero fluctuation in the women. Men are more likely, as a result of this increase in testosterone, to take risks, and risks might, in a competitive encounter, might be beneficial.
The testosterone-powered men quickly take the lead. Lucy in cart 6, the woman who wanted to win, is languishing in 7th place. But right at the very front is Lloyd, hotly pursued by Jamie, driving cart number 8.
But there's an individual who's very much worth pointing out to you, and that is number 2. If we look at his T levels and compare them with his pre-race levels, there's a substantial increase. He's likely to be a very competitive, highly strong individual who takes it very seriously.
I'm more interested in engineering than I am in people. If it came a choice between separating me from my lathe and separating me from Oliver, I would let go of the lathe. But I wouldn't give it up easily. I need to go fast. I can't just secretly let him win like his mum can. I just don't feel it's honest. Right, are you ready? You ready for this?
No.
Jump, jump. To be honest, I don't really feel bad that he's crying. To me, he's just displaying what I would feel if I lost. I'd want to be doing the same thing, really.
How old is he?
6. I'm not a monster.
But monstrous things are happening to Lloyd. Jamie's taken the lead and he's not showing any signs of giving it back. But as Lloyd tries to regain the lead, his testosterone skyrockets and things go from bad to worse. Yet more testosterone and more stupid risks. Lloyd's race position is in freefall. As Jamie strolls past the checkered flag, Lloyd's world has disintegrated. The former race leader finishes 5th.
There's an extraordinary finding here where number 2's testosterone levels decline rapidly to nearly that of his pre-race levels, which suggests to me that something unusual is happening. Something's gone wrong here, and I suspect he's not very happy about it.
I feel absolutely enraged, not with anybody else but with myself. 5 minutes ago, when you were up there, I could have gone out, smashed something, hit somebody. That's how I felt. I wouldn't have done, because you can't do that in public. But
I felt good, but I mean, I did actually aim to win. I wasn't going in to, I wanted to have a good time, but I wanted to win as well.
Jamie's testosterone levels during the race reveal the secret of his success. While Lloyd's levels went through the roof, Jamie's were much more subtle, allowing him to become more competitive and take informed risks. His modest rises were useful, where Lloyd's were catastrophic. But if we look at the women, there's no rise in testosterone levels at all. There's no doubt that women can be competitive, but they don't have the edge that testosterone can give men.
I am a very competitive person, and I was trying to do my best. I think I just, you know, break, and then when I see somebody in front of me, instead of trying to swerve around them, I hesitate.
The men's rise in testosterone turbocharges their competitive instinct, though it can be a very mixed blessing.
I did. Cheers, big guys.
It's not by chance that women are less prone to road rage. Testosterone is an incredibly powerful hormone. It affects us all, men and women. And it affects us well before we're even born. For the first few weeks of development, it's impossible to tell if the tiny embryo floating in its amniotic fluid is a boy or a girl. They all appear to be female. But in week 8, the males start to produce testosterone in huge quantities, and their bodies change. And it's recently been discovered that from the very start, they seem to behave differently as well. At just a few hours old, girls prefer to look at a human face, while boys will look at, well, anything really. Barely born, and yet girls like people, and boys like things. Professor Simon Baron-Cohen had a hunch that the differences in behaviour were down to testosterone. He just needed proof.
I was very surprised to discover that hospitals routinely store the amniotic fluid after they carry out an amniocentesis. This was the opportunity that we were looking for. Here was the fluid that, if you like, allowed us to go back in time to make any link between the hormone levels in the womb and the child's current behaviour.
Well, finding the amniocentesis test was tremendously exciting because never before were you able to measure testosterone levels produced by the child and look at later behaviour in relation to that.
Oh, look at that there. Why do you think the big triangle is pushing the little one? You don't know? Well, all the cartoons are designed to make people think about the two triangles as people. And what we want to look at is whether there's any difference between the ones with high testosterone and low testosterone.
The kids with high testosterone are more likely to behave in a masculine way than the kids with low testosterone.
The mummy and the baby, and the mummy's pushing the baby out of the farm so she could watch telly. The baby too noisy.
Yeah, that's great. If the big triangle was a person, what kind of person would it be?
A triangle person.
A triangle person? What about the little triangle? What kind of person would they be?
Yeah, but they're not, because they haven't got any legs.
And we've been able to show that the testosterone levels, week 16 of your life, are related to the eye contact you make, the social relationships you have, the interests you have, how fast you learn to talk. All these things that could be very, very important in the long term for who you are.
Most of us will never have the opportunity to have our amniotic fluid analysed. But there is a scientist whose controversial theory could mean that we can all tell how much testosterone we've been exposed to in the womb right now.
Our fingers have information about how much testosterone, how much estrogen we've been exposed to in the womb. So the longer one's ring finger relative to one's index finger, the more testosterone you've had. And that testosterone has an effect on the brain and on the body. If a boy has a large amount of testosterone before birth, he's likely to be born with a very efficient heart and vascular system. So the longer one's ring finger relative to one's index finger, the faster one can run.
These athletes are 5,000 metres specialists. Professor Manning has never met them or seen them race, but if his theory is correct, he'll be able to tell us all about them.
What I should be able to do is look at the differences between the ring finger and the index finger, and on that basis rank these runners first, second, third, fourth, and so on. In theory, that should work.
In practice, we're providing Professor Manning with photocopies of the athlete's hands, and in return, he's risking his reputation by providing us with the results of a race that has yet to be run.
I'm looking at a kind of living fossil in the fingers, something which tells us about an event a long time ago in the development of this particular individual. Each of these cards has got a number on. The number's obscured, so don't take the front off. And the number is my prediction as to where you're going to end up at the end of the race. On your marks! There are other variables that I just have no knowledge of whatsoever. How many times do these runners train, for example? Are they feeling okay today? Have they had a row with their girlfriend? You know, I don't know these men, and all I've seen are their hands. You know, I'm quite nervous about this. I hope I'm right, and I'm willing to give it a go.
In most people, the difference between ring and index fingers is small, but the ring finger of one of our runners is a whopping 6 millimeters longer than his index finger. And Professor Manning is certain that he's found his winner.
That was absolutely magnificent.
Thank you.
What I'd like you to do is to line up in your finishing order, and we'll work down the line and I'll rip your numbers off. Starting with Russell.
Oh my god, that is amazing. What luck so far? No way! Oh, controversy! He was in front of him. See where he comes.
6. We've got 4 out of 6 right, but the 2 that were wrong were kind of quite close.
Yeah, I thought the finger thing was bollocks because there's so many variables. I'm very impressed.
Professor Manning has agreed to do one further, more radical test. To see if finger length can be used to determine our volunteers' brain sex. How male or female their brains are.
If I arrange you along this line, in terms of the amount of testosterone you've had before birth, that has no implications for sexuality, but it has some implications about your very, very early brain organisation.
Our fingers may provide a record of testosterone in the womb, because the genes that trigger its production also determine finger growth. In general, the men and women perform to type. The men are at the male end, and the women are at the female end. Liz and Craig are at opposite ends. But there's one exception. Grace's fingers put her well into the male domain. In our survey of 500,000 people, the biggest difference between men and women was in visuospatial tasks. On average, men scored 40% higher than women. But some women did outstandingly well. And Professor Manning thinks that's partly down to testosterone. If Professor Manning is right, Grace should do rather well at our very own visuospatial task.
Hi everybody.
Hi.
My name's Tony.
Good morning.
I'm here today to teach you on the CAT 432 backhoe loader.
Operating a digger requires a lot of hand-eye coordination and visuospatial skills.
Okay, as if you're holding a fine lady.
And according to our survey, most women aren't that great at visuospatial skills.
Put the bucket flat.
Right, buckets. Which one's the bucket?
Yeah, don't dig it in there.
Right, but that's...
Yeah.
Just got to be gentle. So you will win, just really gentle. These lot are like...
That's brilliant.
All our volunteers have to do is copy Tony.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
And try not to break too many eggs. According to Professor Manning, Grace is the only woman who'll be any good at this.
Oh, shit.
As expected, the women were comprehensively outclassed by the men.
I'm breaking my bucket!
But there was one exception. Grace was joint winner with Lloyd, scoring 3 times higher than the rest of the women.
I think most of the girls, the other 4 girls, are living up to the social expectations of being woman-like, whereas Grace hasn't fallen into that trap.
I'm a flight test engineer on the Eurofighter Typhoon. I assess the aircraft systems whilst it's being flown by one of our test pilots. I wouldn't really say I was a girly girl at all. I've always found boys' toys far more interesting than girls.
You might think that Grace has simply acquired 3D skills by becoming an engineer. But her fingers tell a different story. Even before she was born, testosterone gave Grace a more male brain with better visuospatial skills. Testosterone is an incredibly powerful hormone that affects us all, men and women.
A triangle person.
A triangle person.
It shapes our bodies
Oh my God.
and affects our minds. And it even seems to be at the heart of why, on average, women are better at language and emotional skills, while men are better at visuospatial skills. But of course, it's not quite that simple. Averages conceal individual differences.
We've got 9 months in the womb to consider, and testosterone is not produced in the same amounts throughout those 9 months. So that it's possible to have a kind of mosaic brain.
Different levels of testosterone at different times in development might explain apparently contradictory brain skills in the same person. So although Paddy's verbal skills put him firmly in the male camp, he was as sensitive as most women when it came to some tests of empathy.
Previously, I perceived it as a weakness, but as the days have gone by and going through all the tests, I'm quite happy. They've got another side to me. But I was also happy that most of the times I was standing on the 100% male brain size.
Time for one last test.
This task
is going to be about changing nappies. And one of you lucky ladies is going to have to be with this crying baby.
On the face of it, simply a question of who's best at childcare. But in fact, it has a deeper purpose.
You were a good boy for Auntie Lulu, weren't you? Because you didn't do any naughtiness for Lulu.
As we might expect, most of the women do the task well.
All right, mate? How you doing?
While most of the men struggle.
Let's see how this thing works. Okay. I think I got it wrong already. Try again. Okay, mate. This will be interesting.
And you might expect testosterone-fueled ultra-male-brained Lloyd to struggle more than most.
I don't think I did a particularly good job of connecting with the child. There was a task to do, and I just had to get on with it and do it. You know, I could be changing the tyre on a car. It's a little bit to one side now. Even my own son, I found it quite alien to connect with him. I only made a connection with my son as he grew older, and the connection got stronger and stronger. It wasn't instinctive, immediate bond. It was something that grew very, very gradually with my son. Right, that's a bit near. Can you see? Not just it there, up back a bit. That's it. I don't connect too easily with people. That's actually making me quite emotional. I just want to cry. I feel like there's something missing.
Many men find making emotional connections difficult. Once the women had changed the nappy, they picked the baby up. In stark contrast, most of the men simply stepped away.
Right. Are you in here? Do you want me to return her, or everything's fine?
Nappy changed, baby spoken to, task done.
You're going to be a footballer. Oh, God, look at
Yet despite Lloyd's fear that he doesn't readily connect, when it came to the end of the baby test, he surprised everyone.
There's a real connection there.
Yeah, he's enjoying that bit. Looks natural to him. It feels natural.
I could kiss you like, oh, I see. Oh, we're talking now, aren't we?
Lloyd is aware that he's not naturally empathic, so he's made more of an effort, working his brain harder. The result is that his behaviour is indistinguishable from the women.
I feel really quite emotional watching that. That's lovely. That is really lovely.
It's almost like he does all these imperfect things, but in his mind, these things don't add up to empathy for some reason. I'm not quite sure how he would describe these things.
The sex of our brain is not as clear-cut as the sex of our body.
I'm much more feminine than I realised.
While women tend to have female brain sex, and men usually have male brain sex, as individuals we are a mosaic, a unique mixture of both.
As a childminder looking after kids, I'd have hoped my empathy score would be a bit better.
You know, I've got a hard exterior, but it's not, so I've got a soft interior.
I can learn a lot from Paddy, and Paddy has learnt me a lot already.
They're saying that guys have these skills and girls have these, but I think you'd be more successful if you were a guy who had all these female skills, because then you have something different to offer.
I perhaps assumed that I had more of a male brain than a female brain, but I think that I have got quite a lot of my female aspects as well, and then to hopefully become a better person for it.
And knowing about our brain sex and where our strengths and weaknesses lie has to mean a better understanding of ourselves and each other.
I think it's a two-way street, and actually that we both actually have to take a little bit more time and effort to understand where the other person is coming from.
Yeah.